All right, how's everyone doing? So I guess I'm running the show today, no worship. So I was glad that you guys didn't ask me to do worship. Singing is not my thing. I can run for days, but singing, no, no. So, anyways, good to be with you guys. I love getting to travel and get to come to new colleges that I've never been to and meet new people. So just super stoked to be here with you guys coming from Arizona. And I wanted to start with a confession. Yeah. So I've actually never said this at a public speaking engagement. How many of you guys are nervous for what I'm about to say right now? You guys a little bit? I'm a little nervous. So, all right, it's not that big of a confession, but I, when I was playing baseball, I was like 13 years old. I used to cry every time after I'd strike out. So that's my confession for you guys. I was a crybaby when I was a teenager. So I wasn't like a little kid that would like, T-ball or whatever, you don't do well and you cry. I was like a big kid and crying. It was like super embarrassing. I'd like walk away and like try and like not show people. But the reason why I'm telling you guys that confession is because it has very much to do with what I'm going to talk to you guys about. And that is I used to carry around this burden to perform. And I used to put all this pressure on myself, like from the time I was a little tiny kid all the way up through. So I've kind of gone through this process, and my story that I'm going to share with you guys is kind of through this lens of like, how do we break free of the things that are weighing us down? And of course, like I'm speaking from my athletic experience, like that's why I'm here, because what I've done athletically. But I really think like this applies to everyone, no matter what we're doing in the world we live in today. It's so easy to walk around with this burden of needing to perform. And burden, like there's a lot of different burdens that I was carrying on my journey with me. And what I found to be really true is what Jesus says. And he says this: he whom the Son sets free is free indeed. When I first started running professionally, I had to come up with a name for my business. So I'm technically like a business as an athlete. So even though I'm sponsored by a shoe company, I'm not an employee of the shoe company. So I'm technically like contracted out to them. So I'm self-employed. So I had to come up with my own company name. And I was like, what is it like that really like captures what I'm going after, what I'm all about as an athlete? And what is it that I really want when I get right down to it as an athlete? What is it that I want more than anything? And I was like, I want to be free. I want to be on the starting line and not have pressure, not have this huge performance burden that I'm carrying around sometimes. I want to be free of that. And what I want is there's this moment for runners. How many of you guys are runners? Am I talking to anyone? Oh, there's a lot of you guys. Wow, all right, nice. So you guys have probably experienced this where you have your days as a runner where you have these moments where you just feel like you're floating. Like it's the coolest experience. And it doesn't happen super often. At least for myself, it didn't. Like it was literally probably like throughout the 20 years that I ran, there was probably a dozen times. And it happened sometimes at seemingly random times. I would be out in the forest running all by myself on these little single track trails, just weaving through the mountains, the pine trees in Southern California. And I just felt like I was in heaven. I just felt like I was just floating, like it was just easy. And it felt like the faster I went, the easier it felt. Like it was like literally it felt like I was in heaven, like a heavenly experience, right? And that only came because I was free on the inside. Like I was out in the forest all by myself. I didn't care about no one was watching me. It was just me and God in the trees, right? And there was just this freedom in my stride, in my spirit, and it just all kind of came together in that moment. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you have ever watched like a horse or a dog when they're out in the forest and they're running and they're just in full flight and they're just like eating up the ground, right? Like these big, long, beautiful strides, a cheetah, a lion. You guys have seen footage of this, right? It feels like that's you in that moment when everything is just flowing. And again, it comes out of this like inner state of being free. And so like me coming here today, that's what I spent 20 years going after. That's what I continue to go after to this day. Because even coming up here right now, it's easy to come up here and be feeling like I need to perform for you guys. I need to bring it. I need to speak perfectly, right? Like, it doesn't matter what we're doing. Like, it's easy to bring performance into everything that we do. And so it's a continual process where I have to cultivate where, how do I see myself? And can I free myself from the burdens that are laying me down? And that's what Jesus came to do. He came to set us free in more ways than to just like stamp our ticket to heaven. Like, I don't think that's all he was talking about when he said that when he came to set us free. Like, he wants to free us in the here and now as well. Like, that is equally important. Jesus said, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. So he wants to free us. And so I want to share my story kind of through that lens of what things were helpful for me on my journey to break free of the things that were holding me down. They were weighing me down on the start line. Because, like I said, I was that 13-year-old kid crying because I would strike out in a baseball game. Like, I had some issues, right? I had some stuff I needed to work through. Like, it was very clear to me and to everyone else, you know? Like, have you ever been to a baseball game where a 13-year-old is crying after he strikes out? I've never seen it before, but I was that guy, right? I had to work through these things. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to impart to you guys today in my talk. All right, so I used to hate running, didn't like it at all. Wanted to be a professional baseball player. That was my goal. Problem was, grew up in Southern California, Big Bear Lake, small little resort town up at 7,000 feet. So I lived like a mile away from a ski resort. So I grew up skiing, snowboarding, that kind of thing. Wasn't really like a beach person, even though I could drive 2 hours and be to the beach. So you could like ski and surf in the same day, which is kind of cool. Beautiful place to grow up. Super grateful that I got to live there. But did not like running. Wanted to be a pro baseball player. 5 foot tall. You know, this is going in. When I was in 8th grade, my mom had this song that she'd sing to me. Again, not going to sing it to you guys because I'm not a singer. But it was this song. I don't know if you've heard it before. It's like, I'm 4'11" and I'm going to heaven, and that makes me feel 5 feet tall. You ever heard it? No? Okay. Well, anyways, my mom, she's got that song like drilled into my mind, and I swear I was singing that song for like 3 years because I could not break 5 foot tall. So, long story short, did not have the frame to play professional baseball, right? 5 foot tall, 100 pounds. So I'd be out on the mound trying to get the ball past people, and just everything inside me going as hard as I possibly can, practicing all the time, spending hours and hours throwing balls against a tarp that my dad had set up in my backyard, and just getting nowhere with it, right? Felt like I was hitting my head against a wall. Just guys would just lick their chop and they'd see me pitching, and they'd just be like, tink, see ya, right? So despite all my efforts, like, it just was not clicking. So one day I was going down to a basketball game, which was also not clicking. Turns out there's a reason why it's helpful to be tall in basketball. I was like the guy who's getting stuffed all the time. That's got to be one of the worst feelings in sport, by the way. If you guys are basketball players, getting stuffed, and I don't miss that at all. So anyway, I was going down to a basketball game, driving by the lake in my hometown, Big Bear. Beautiful, crystal clear, blue lake, blue sky day. I'll never forget the moment. I was just looking out over the lake, and I felt like God just kind of planted this little thought in my mind. And it's easy for me now, looking back on it, to be like, this was totally God. But at the time, it wasn't so clear. I was kind of like, is this God, or is this just me being weird? Because I grew up as a Christian in a Christian home, but like, I wasn't really having interactions with God. It's like I'd read my chapter of the Bible of one chapter a day, say a 5-minute prayer, and that was pretty much the extent of my spiritual life, right? Up until that point. So I felt like God was telling me, like, I want you to try and run around the lake. And I was like, that's a really bad idea. I've never even been on a run before. I'm 13 years old. That's a really long ways to go. Plus, I'm at 7,000 feet altitude. So I was kind of like reasoning with God a little bit. That never goes anywhere, by the way. God always wins that one. And so, long story short, I ended up running 15 miles around the lake the next Saturday with my dad, laced up my basketball shoes. Turns out there's a reason why basketball shoes are different than running shoes. My feet were just all blistered and bloodied up by the end of that run. It was a mess. And you would think if you were looking in on the situation, me stumbling through the front door after this exhausting like 4-hour run around the lake where I had to stop and ice my legs in the frigid waters in Big Bear Lake just to get through the run. I was just like a mess when I came through the front door. So I collapsed on the couch, just super tired. And I was just telling some of the kids I was just chatting with before this that, side note, if you want to hear God's voice, really helpful to get yourself physically exhausted. I I always hear God better when I'm really tired. My mind just calms down. It's just easier for me to connect with God. It's also easier for me to connect with God when I'm out moving too. And I'm gonna get more into like how do we hear God's voice, because that was a big part of my story and my journey. So anyways, collapsed on the couch, and I felt like God was telling me again, and this is like, again, the second time I feel like I'm hearing something from God. And it wasn't an audible voice, right? It was just something that like I felt deep down inside me. I felt like it was a thought that was coming from somewhere that was outside of me. And that thought brought intrigue, it brought curiosity, it brought joy, it brought hope. Like when I'm talking to people about how do you know if you're hearing God's voice, I always ask them, if they're not sure, like, what did you feel with that? Like, what did it bring on it? And if it came laced with hope, with joy, and even if it's a corrective thing, it's like, yeah, I messed this up. I feel like God's like correcting me here in this situation, but it's still like, it brings like, I need to fix this because there's hope that if I do, it's for my benefit, right? Like God's always speaking to us to make us better. And so I felt like God was telling me, I've given you a gift to run with the best guys in the world, but I gave you that gift so you could help other people. And that was such a huge launching moment for me. I'm so glad that I had that, because from that moment on, like a question I get oftentimes is like, were you surprised that you qualified for 2 Olympics? Were you surprised by setting American records? Were you surprised by all the stuff that happened? And I'm not trying to be like prideful or anything, but my answer is just always like, no, I wasn't, because I believe these things were going to happen that moment, sitting in my couch when I was 13 years old, like when God communicated those things to me. I started to believe that. And if there's anything Jesus has taught me, it's that he cares a lot more about what's going on inside of me compared to what I'm doing on the outside, right? And so the moment I began to believe, I started acting out of that belief. So I went from a kid who hated to run to a kid who was just like, have you guys seen Rocky? Tell me if you've seen Rocky. I'm going to feel so old if you guys haven't seen Rocky. Okay, some of the staff are raising their hand, not making me feel good, guys. There we go. I felt like I was in a Rocky, like, like the part where the music comes on and he's training super hard. I love that scene. I used to watch that all the time, Rocky 4. You guys are missing out if you haven't seen it. But I went from a kid who hated to run to a kid who's just like, this was my all-consuming passion. This is what I was going after, right? And where did that drive come from? It came from this belief that all of a sudden was planted in me when I was 13 years old on that couch that, hey, this is where you're going. This is what's going to happen. And I believed that. And it didn't matter that I was light years away from that. I wasn't that good of a runner when I got into running. I didn't float around the lake. I wasn't, actually, funny story, I'm so glad that my wife and I didn't go to the same high school or the same middle school, because when I was in middle school, she was actually faster than I was. Like if I would have raced her, she would have waxed me, and then I probably would have never run again, right? I'd have been like, oh, apparently I'm missing this because I'm supposed to be good at this, and my future wife is destroying me. So even though it didn't look like from the outside I was going where I was going to go, I had that belief inside me. So my question is to you is, what do you believe about yourself? And the thing is, I think oftentimes we think you got to have a moment like I had, where it's this divine, but guys, my moment, it was so critical, so important. That's why I'm talking to you guys about it. But it was so ordinary too. I mean, it was just an ordinary moment. I was just a 13-year-old kid. I didn't hear a divine voice. It wasn't something crazy, but it planted this belief inside me that this is going to happen. This is where I'm going. And every person in this room, you can have that moment. And it doesn't have to be some crazy supernatural experience. Like, it's possible to have that experience whenever you want it. All you got to do is ask God the question, how do you see me? Who am I? Where am I going? What should I believe about myself? But so important that we cultivate, not just like receive what we believe about ourselves, but daily remind ourselves how God sees us, where we're going, what our vision is, so that we can stay the course. Because we are going to act out of whatever we believe about ourselves. So, like I said, everything changed at that moment. Went from a kid who hated to run to a kid who was like, this is my everything. This is my drive. I'm going to see whatever talent God's put in me. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I'm going to see how good at this thing I can get. And that was such a fun, and still is to this day. I'm going after it in a different way, different goals, different season of life that I'm in now. But looking back in that season in particular, such a fun way to go after life. Just being like, I know where I'm going, and now I'm just running after this thing with everything inside me. So I had some early successes, as we often do, I think. When we start out on the journey that God's called us to be on, oftentimes, like, I feel like he kind of like rewards us for stepping out in faith and going after things by having cool early experiences with it, by having early success. So I ended up running a state record in California over 1,600 meters, winning a couple state titles, earning a scholarship to Stanford University where I went to school. But oftentimes it's like we have these early successes and then you go through the fire and God's kind of like, okay, or at least this was my journey. He's like, now I need to work on some things, right? So like, I got you going in the right direction. I gave you some encouragement early on. Now let's do some inner work. So what happened is I went to Stanford and I just thought, oh man, my trajectory, I'm just going up and to the right. Just steady progress the whole way, right? Like that's how it's going to be. My expectations were set. My goals were set. I actually used to write my goals in cement in my backyard every summer, write down how fast I wanted to run the mile. And I hit some of those and I didn't hit some of those, but it was a kind of a cool, like, almost prophetic way of being like, this is what I'm going after. I'm putting it in cement. But anyway, so I was really intense about what I was going after, right? So I went to Stanford with these heavy goals, with these expectations of how I was going to perform athletically. And it's almost like immediately, like I was in a prize fight and the guy just like came out of the ring, just ding, 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 hit me in the chin like 3 times, right? Academically, I was struggling. I'll never forget, I had to take freshman writing class. And I turned in one of my early papers and I got it back and it was just like red all over it. Like it's more red than like writing I could see. And my teacher gave it back to me. She's like, Ryan, we have a serious problem here. And I was like, okay, I was already really nervous. Didn't really need that. But thanks now for like really freaking me out about my academics. Funny now because I've written 2 books since then. So I should send her signed copies. I don't have any, but... No, she was actually really cool. She was just trying to help me. She was just encouraging me. And I actually really liked her and got along well with her. But all that to say, I was struggling. I tell people my time at Stanford, I swear every single winter, haven't you guys ever gotten poison oak before? Not fun. Every winter I'd be hurt, I'd have poison oak, and I'd be sick all at the same time. I remember one time I was dating now my wife, girlfriend at the time, Sarah, and I called her in the morning. I was like, listen, you got to come pick me up. Like, I just woke up. I try to look in the mirror, and it looks like I just got out of a prize fight or something. Like, one eye I can't even see out of. It's just swollen all the way. And the other eye's, like, going that direction. I was like, I'm going to be blind as a bat here in a second if you don't come pick me up. But I was just struggling at Stanford. Really hard struggling. Wasn't getting enough sleep. Wasn't eating well. Spiritually, things weren't going great for me. And I was just getting more and more depressed with each day that was going by. So I kind of survived my freshman year, got into my sophomore year, and things just weren't going well athletically. And the problem was, whenever I looked in the mirror in the morning, all I was seeing was my performances. And how I felt about myself was all just based on how am I doing? How am I doing academically? How am I doing spiritually? How am I doing mainly in the running space? How am I performing? And my freshman year, I cost our team the NCAA title, Division I title in cross country. We lost that race. It's a team race. We lost by 1 point. So if one runner would have passed another runner, we would have won the meet. And so we lost the NCAA title, and I was our seventh guy. I ran terrible. So basically, like, I cost our team an NCAA title my first year at Stanford in cross country. So I had some just like really hard athletic experiences, and I was just depressed. And I was sick of looking in the mirror. I was sick of who I was. And things were not getting better. So I thought that I could change what was going on inside me if I changed my external situation. So I dropped out of Stanford, didn't know if I was going to come back, didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I had to go back home and get things right. So went back home, and you do not change internal problems by changing your external situation. That was a big lesson that I learned. Went back home, got even more depressed. Luckily, had a good conversation with my pastor at home, and he told me, he's like, what's the last thing you knew for sure God was telling you to do? And I was like, I know he was calling me to go to Stanford. So he's like, go back and do that. Like, just go back to what you knew you were supposed to be doing and go do that. And that really helped me a lot, because before that, my time at Stanford, I was always like, well, this program, they're doing this. And I always thought the grass is greener on the other side. If I go somewhere else, things are going to get better. And when I went back to Stanford, there's just this commitment of like, no, this is what God told me to do, and I'm going to finish the course no matter what. So things didn't immediately change when I went back to Stanford, but I started to do this. I've always had a thing for stadiums for some reason. I think it's this like dream that God always gave me of running in the Olympics. And so I'd ride my bike down to the Stanford football stadium, and I'd just sit in there, and I'd read the Bible, and I'd journal. And really what changed a lot in my spiritual life is I started asking God questions. I started asking him this one question that I really want you guys to take time this week to ask God this question and write it down. Like, it's so important that these thoughts, that these things God's telling us don't just stay in our head. They get either spoken out to someone else or that they get written down. There's just power in writing down what God is saying and speaking out what God is saying. So I started asking God this question: how do you see me? And that was the turning point of me getting through depression. Is, God, how do you see me right now? And I realized as God was speaking to me about that, it had nothing, how he sees me has nothing to do with how I'm performing. He doesn't care how fast I run. He doesn't care what place I am. He doesn't care how I'm doing academically. He does care about my heart and what's going on inside me. He does want me to pursue my gifts to the best of my ability. But, he's not like, how did you run so bad in that race? Like, he doesn't judge me based off my performance. And I start to realize, like, there is actually nothing I can do, not one thing I can do to make God love me any more than he loves me right now. And that's true of each one of us sitting in this room right now. Like, no matter what you do, what great act you do, you cannot make God love you more than he already loves you. You also can't make him love you any less. Like, God's love for you is constant, is fixed, is great, it is fierce, it is never ending. It couldn't be any bigger. It can't grow anymore. And as I started to like really get that and really start to see myself, okay, if God sees me this way, like he just loves me because he loves me, because he loves me, because he loves me. If God sees me like that, maybe I should start seeing myself that way as well. And so that was a gradual shift. Again, it wasn't just like a one-time thing. And again, it's a cultivating thing that I have to continue to do to this day and try and see myself the same way that God sees me. And as that internal change started to happen, external changes happened as well. What happened is I became fearless. So I was no longer bound up, right? I'm doing workouts, and I'm not nervous about the workouts as much anymore. I'm still like nervous, excited. Like, I tell people, it's okay to be nervous. There's nothing wrong with being nervous. It's actually a good thing. It's like how you get up it's the body's way to like get up for something, right? But you want to be like excited, not nervous, not fearful nervous. There's a big, big difference there. And I was fearful nervous before that. After that, I was excited nervous. And being fearless as an athlete, I almost felt even reckless because I just was not afraid to fail. So all of a sudden, it's like I'm running with the best guys in the world. Even though I don't belong with those guys yet, I'm going out with them. And that's really what kind of set me apart as a runner, as a distance runner in the United States, is oftentimes like people are afraid of running with the Kenyans, with the Ethiopian guys, because they're so dominant and so good. So they don't even try and run with them. They just like let them go. And I was never like that. It's like, all right, if we're going, we're going. And I would blow up all the time. I'd have bad races 8 out of 10 times. But those 2 out of 10 times when I did hit it, it was really, really special. And it was that boldness to not be afraid of failure that allowed me to experience greater breakthroughs than I ever would have had before if I would have just been running out of trying to not fail. There's a big difference between trying not to fail and being fearless. And that's really the shift that kind of happened during that time. And it helped not only lift me out of depression, but helped get me out of my depression and perform better as well. So, long story short, ended up winning an NCAA title my senior year at Stanford and signing a pro contract to run professionally, which would have never happened. I wasn't having a good career at all at Stanford. It's just like I hit one good season and the doors just came open. So I went, started running professionally. I was training in Mammoth Lakes, California, and joined the pro team there, and everything was going great. And I qualified for my first Olympic team, ran in the Beijing Olympics. Quick story from that. I had a goal of trying to get a medal in those Olympics, and the race was just not going that direction. It was super hot and humid, and yet the Kenyan guys still just went out at a record. They set an Olympic record in the race, even despite it being really tough conditions. And I was pouting in the race. I was like, man, this is like the one day of the year I really want to have a great race, and I'm not having a good day out there, and I'm so bummed, so disappointed about this. And so I started having conversation with God during the race. I was like, just airing out my frustrations. It wasn't so much a conversation. It was just me pouting to God, Have you ever had those prayer times? And David had those times too, if you want to read Psalms. He has times where he's just venting to God, And I think God's okay with us venting towards him. I think there's a time and place for that. So I was just kind of venting to God. I was like, I'm so frustrated right now. Why is it going like this? And I felt like he was telling me, I want you to start encouraging the people around you. And I think that's another kind of key for getting through tough times that we might be going through. And the thing is, it's the last thing we feel like doing, right? When our world is crumbling around us, when we're going through depression, through hard times, through struggles, the last thing I feel like doing anyways is encouraging someone else. I'm like, I feel so empty right now. I feel so flat right now. I need someone to encourage me. I don't need to be encouraging other people, right? I'm looking for encouragement. Yet, there's a verse in the Bible that says that those who water will themselves be watered. And that's such a good verse. It's so true. I experienced that to be so true in that Olympic marathon where I started catching guys. I started encouraging them. And what happened? I started getting encouraged. I started feeling better. I went from 50th place halfway through the race to starting to encourage guys. And then all of a sudden, I worked myself up to 10th place. And I promise you that would have not happened if I wasn't catching guys and just being like, hey, you're doing a great job, man. Keep it up. Let's work together. Let's try and keep moving forward, which that obviously doesn't usually happen in Olympic marathons. But that was the kind of upside down kingdom that God has created for us where we want encouragement. And the way to get that is actually to encourage other people. So going into the tunnel in the Olympics, I was still bummed out how things were going. And I felt like God was telling me running through that tunnel is just this eerie quiet, right? No one's running around me. It's just, there's no security guards in there. All I hear is the pitter patter of my feet, just super quiet. All I hear is my feet. And I felt like God was telling me in that moment, even though I was disappointed, I know this isn't everything that you dreamed of happening, but this is good for you. This is what you need for this moment right now. And that's something that I've learned a lot through my faith and through my journey is how important it is to really, really believe and buy in to the fact that God is a good dad. He's a good dad and he knows what's best for me. And even when it doesn't feel like this is what's best for me, I can trust that he knows what's best for me. And so I was able to believe that. And then that shifted my attitude. And I went from someone who was grumpy going into the tunnel to someone who's just grateful for what God had given me in that moment, even though it didn't meet my expectations. And I was able to enjoy that last lap around the track and finish and just soak in that beautiful moment that I dreamed of from the time I was 13 years old. So after that moment, how are we doing on time? What time are we need to be out here? 10 more minutes. All right. I got a cool video I want to show you guys, so don't leave. got a good video coming at the end. So after that, I want to share with you guys a little bit of my experience of being desperate for God. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when things are going really well, I find that my faith kind of like takes a back seat a little bit. And so after the Olympics, even though I was the fastest American marathoner and had set American records, been to Olympics, like my dreams were happening, right? Like I was seeing this happen. I was running with the best guys in the world. And yet my faith just felt kind of stale. It's like, I don't really need God for anything. And I just spent some time over in Zambia because my wife and I, we've gotten involved with, again, like part of my vision is like, how do you help other people through running? We started our own foundation, the Hall Steps Foundation. And so we do work like all over the world, but particularly in Africa, just working on issues of poverty. And so one of the things we did is we were team captains for Team World Vision, group of 500 runners ran the Chicago Marathon, brought clean water to 90,000 people in Zambia. The average life expectancy in those communities where they brought clean water went from 45 years old to 55 years old. So 90,000 people got 10 extra years of life simply because a bunch of people got together and ran a race. And so that was kind of like the aha moment for me of being like, how do you help other people through running? I don't get it. That moment, being at that borehole cutting ceremony, bringing clean water to these people, having a community member tell me, hey, because you guys did this, I'm going to live 10 years longer. I was just like, whoa, like that's it, aha, like that was like the moment where it all clicked. This is how you help other people through running. So anyways, we have a big, big heart for global poverty and getting involved in that. And where was I going with that? There's always one moment where I get stuck. So talking about the Olympics, global poverty. Oh, yeah, so what I observed from my time in Zambia is these people were just so hungry for God to show up, right? Like they were desperate for him to show up because they needed him to show up, right? They're in desperate situations where they didn't have access prior to us coming. They didn't have access to clean water or health clinics or a lot of the things that we take for granted in our life today. And that gave them a desperation for God that I was jealous of. I was like, I wish that I was that desperate for God to show up. And so I started asking myself the question, like, how do I position myself in such a way where I have this same kind of desperation, where I'm falling on my knees every single morning being like, God, you have to show up because I don't know what to do. And so I decided to leave our professional team in Mammoth Lakes, leave my coach, which was a very difficult decision because I really liked my coach. I liked my team. I liked being in Mammoth Lakes and training there. I was happy, and yet I was just compelled by, like, I have to be desperate for God. I want that more than anything else. And so I went on this journey of being faith-based coached, where basically, like, God was my coach, and learned so much throughout this journey. And one of the biggest lessons I learned is that, I was just telling this to the class I was speaking to earlier, is I expected God to show up in a very tangible way in the sense that he was going to tell me exactly what workouts I needed to be doing, because that was essentially what I was doing. I was like, God, like, what do I do for training today? Like, I want to hear your voice on this. I know you want to be involved in my everyday life and everything that I'm doing. Like, please, like, give me insight in how to do this. And so I was expecting to just like have workouts, like dreams of workouts or workouts on papers just written that I'd find that are like divinely placed from God, right? And that was so not the case. Like every time I went to God being like, please tell me what workout to do, I always felt like he was always telling me it's more important how you do your workout than the actual workout that you do. And I've always just found this over and over again with God. Like, he's so much more concerned about how we're doing what we're doing than what we are actually doing. I can do the same exact workout, one with the wrong heart, where I'm just trying to push, I'm trying to prove myself. I'm doing it out of a heart of insecurity because I'm not secure in who I am. And I'm going to overrun that workout. I'm going to overcook. It's going to lead to burnout, to fatigue, to some real problems. Yet if I do that same exact workout and I'm secure in who I am, I feel loved, I feel of value, I don't feel like I need to prove myself, then I do the workout at the right effort level, my body responds well, I recover well, I see progress, it sets me on the right course. So that was probably like the biggest lesson that I learned during that season of having God as my coach. The other lesson I want to share with you guys before I get to my closing remarks and video that I want to take you guys through is just realizing that hearing God's voice it's okay for it to be messy. It's not a perfect process. So I have a documentary that recently came out that kind of shows, especially like my time from the London Olympics, kind of through the end of my career. And you'll see examples of me in there where I feel like I'm hearing God telling me stuff about training, about how races are going to go, about different things, and I'm just simply getting it wrong. And it's not super fun for me to watch me making mistakes on the big screen, but it's real. And I think it's important that oftentimes we're okay with making mistakes in the classroom, in training, in stuff that we're doing, but we have like a different standard where it's like, okay, if I think I heard God and I get it wrong, this means God's not real anymore, right? At least I've bought into that thought myself, so I'm speaking from my own experience here. But like I hold this thing like, if I don't get this right, then like my whole faith is out the window. When really there's this verse in Proverbs that says, where no oxen are, the manger is clean, but much revenue comes by the strength of the ox. That's Proverbs 14:4. And you could think about that one for a while. You might want to look that one up. But basically, like what it's saying is, yes, like ox make a mess, but they also bring revenue. They bring growth. They help you get to the next level, right? And oftentimes in our pursuit, we don't want the mess of the ox. We just want the revenue. We want the growth, right? But that's not how things work. And it's not how things work when we're trying to hear God's voice. It might be messy. You might get it wrong. Be okay with that. I always tell people, for me, trying to hear God's voice is like trying to learn a different language. You have to stumble through it for a little bit, and that's okay. All right, I'm going to run through this last part super quick, guys, because I know we're running short on time. But the biggest thing that has freed me in my career is this. Every person, if you know Jesus, it does not get better than that. You have already won. So visualization is a big part of what I do now as a coach, try to get my athletes to visualize, and what I've done as an athlete as well. It's so powerful. I could go on and on about visualization. So I want you guys to just humor me here and run through a quick visualization with me. So imagine this. Imagine you're competing in the Olympic Games. You're in the half-pipe competition, and you get 3 runs in the half-pipe competition, and you are leading, meaning you get to go last on the third run, right? So you're the last competitor to go. So if no one beats your score, you've already won the Olympic Games, and you get to take your last run, and it does not matter how you do. So imagine you are standing on the top of the half pipe, and the athlete that just went before you is the last person that could dethrone you, that could take the Olympic title from you, because you've already hit a score that's higher than anyone else has hit. Last athlete goes down. You watch them take their last run. They announce the athlete's score, and it didn't beat your score. So at that moment, you're Olympic champion, gold medal. Like this moment that you've worked your entire life for, like you got it, right? Imagine the sense of relief, of joy, just imagine how you'd feel standing on the top of that half pipe and knowing you've already got the Olympic gold medal in your back pocket. Now, you get to take that last run, and you get to just air it out. Imagine how free, how light, how good you'd feel in that last run. Just no pressure at all, just pure bliss. You just get to enjoy yourself. You just get to be you to the fullest. You get to take your craft and just air it out, and it does not matter. You're the best person in the world at what you do. And the reason why I want to tell you guys this, and I actually want to show you what happens, because this actually happened in the 2018 Olympic Games, where Chloe Kim, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I'm going to show you guys a quick clip here of what happened. She had this exact experience. She gets to take her last run knowing she's already the Olympic champion. So you guys can go ahead and roll that. I know we're running short on time, so we won't go, but they go on. She scored 98 in that run. So she took her score, already Olympic champion, 93. She scores 98. First person to put back-to-back 1080s in the Olympic Games, right? So that's what happens when we are that kind of free, right? And that's what I want, not just for athletes, for every single person in this room. I want you guys to know, Like there's nothing better than knowing Jesus. Like if you know Jesus, you have already won. It does not get better than that. It doesn't matter if you're set American records, going to Olympic Games, even winning gold medals. Like there's nothing better than Jesus and knowing him. And so can we walk around with that kind of lightness, that kind of freeness, knowing we have already won, and now we get to go through life just airing it out, because literally we cannot fail if we have Jesus. So hope that's encouraging to you guys. Have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week.